I think everyone has read stories of people who have experienced clinical death. Many of them described seeing a light at the end of a tunnel and encountering deceased loved ones. But this usually didn't last long, as they were soon brought back to our world. But what about those who died for good? Would you like to hear the story of such a person? Let me tell it to you. Right now, I am a woman, but in my past life, I was a man. So I will write about myself in the masculine form to better convey my state of mind and worldview at that time. So I lived in America in a small backwater town in the South. My life was relatively peaceful and quite ordinary. I died at around 60 years old from a heart attack. I can't say that I was afraid of death, but I also doubted that any form of existence awaited me after it. I died in the early 1980s. Not long before that, in the 60s and 70s, Eastern philosophy became popular in America. So even I, a simple rural man, had heard about the theory of reincarnation. However, it was mostly spread by people who didn't inspire much trust in me: hippies, rockers, and other members of the so called dubious youth. So I considered reincarnation more of a fantasy than a reality. After death, I expected either to disappear entirely from the world, which, by the way, didn't scare me much, or to end up in some version of the afterlife as described in religion. But those were just my expectations. In reality, the story took a completely different turn. My death happened rather quickly. I had had heart problems for a long time, then suddenly suffered a heart attack and died almost instantly. I remember the sensation of leaving my body. It happened within seconds. First, I felt my heart stop. Then came a ringing in my ears and the inability to breathe. And then, almost immediately, I saw myself from the outside, lying on the bed. Strangely, I wasn't frightened. My first thought was, well, that's it, finally. A little later, my relatives found me. They even tried to resuscitate me, but it was useless. The whole time I was there with them, near my home, watching everything from the outside. Here's a small explanation. Everyone knows that when a person dies, they permanently leave their physical body. However, besides that, we also have an entire set of subtle bodies. And immediately after death, consciousness shifts into one of these bodies, the one closest to the earthly world. This body is called the astral body, and that's exactly where I ended up the moment I died. The astral body of the deceased exists in the subtle world, which is called the astral. From the astral, one can see our world, allowing the deceased to observe earthly life, their home, their loved ones. In addition, people in this state even develop certain supernatural abilities. I'll talk more about those later. At first, my new state delighted me. I felt a certain freedom and lightness. Within just a few hours, I realized that I could move anywhere just by willing it. That is, as soon as I thought about someone or something, I would instantly be right next to that person or place. This occupied me so much that for a while I just wandered around and visited everyone I could remember. Another thing that made my situation easier was knowing that no one was grieving over me too much. My parents were no longer alive. My son was already an adult, and we hadn't been very close. As for my ex-wife, we had separated years ago. Besides, my friends and acquaintances were aware of my heart problems, so my death didn't come as a shock to anyone. In my new form, I could unmistakably sense the emotions of everyone I observed. It worked like this: I would connect to them and see their feelings from the outside. I found it interesting to see how different people reacted to the news of my death. Some were genuinely sad, while others knew they should feel grief, but struggled to actually force it out of themselves. I chuckled and thought, I wonder how they'd react if they knew I was actually right here, watching them. It was also amusing to see animals and birds in this new state, to look at their emotions and feelings. I had never really thought about what cows or horses, for example, might feel, but now I understood that they had emotions too, simpler and purer compared to humans. Interestingly, many animals on my farm actually recognized me. Unlike people, they hadn't lost their ability to see more subtle energies, so they reacted to my presence almost the same way they had in life. They became animated and followed me with their eyes. Besides being able to see others' emotions and feelings, my perception of the world itself changed. In particular, my vision seemed to expand compared to before. If previously I had seen the world through my eyes, now it was as if I saw with my entire body. Because of this, my field of view widened. It was now a full 360 degrees. Sound also felt different. It was like waves passing through me. Some were pleasant, while others were not. And these waves contained countless shades and nuances, far more than I had ever noticed while alive. In short, I perceived the world on a much deeper level. It was as if, before, I had seen it as a flat painting, but now it had become fully three-dimensional. I observed not just people and objects, but also the energy behind them, and that was fascinating. However, my own emotions and thoughts didn't change much. If anything, I felt a bit more cheerful than before. First, I no longer had to worry about death. I was already dead. Second, I enjoyed my newfound freedom and sensations. I wasn't particularly concerned about what would happen next. I was too caught up in experiencing this new state. And so my first days after death passed as I roamed around, waiting for my funeral and watching over my acquaintances.